Thanks, everyone. It's great to be here today to have a conversation about ICMS. As Patrick said, I'm Grainne Connolly. I'm with the Marine Engineering Division, and I'm based with them in Ballyshannon in County Donegal. Our headquarters are Clonakilty in Cork, and we have a few other regional offices around the country also. So I have a very brief presentation for you today, and in it I'll discuss the Marine Engineering Division and the types of projects we deliver. I'll talk about how we got involved with the development of the marine water-based infrastructure project types for ICMS. I'll talk about the government mandate to adopt this standard on all public works projects. And finally, I'll discuss the opportunities and challenges of adopting ICMS on projects. So the Marine Engineering Division deliver civil engineering and building projects in the 6 fishery harbour centres nationally, and they're located at Killybegs, Rossaveel, Dingle, Castletownbere, Dunmorith and Howth. And the types of projects we deliver are quay walls to all depths, piers or jetties, mooring and breasting dolphins, slipways, small craft harbours or marinas, ferry berths, shore power for vessels, and all types of breakwater, rubble mounted composite breakwaters. We also deliver several building projects, excuse me, mainly harbour office administration buildings, industrial buildings such as cargo sheds, engineering workshops, and more recently we've provided some welfare facilities buildings for the small craft harbour, so that's toilets, showers, changing facilities and the like. So these are the type of projects we deliver. So it's by virtue of delivering our marine civil engineering projects that Charles Mitchell from the Infrastructure Division of the Department of Public Expenditure and Gerard O'Sullivan approached us and asked us to get involved with the development of the marine water-based infrastructure project types for the 3rd version of ICMS. So in consultation with some Dutch colleagues, it was decided that 4 new project types were appropriate, and they were ports and waterway works, offshore structures and nearshore structures. And the work involved in developing these project types for ICMS was to inform the technical project attributes, and that involved defining the functional types of infrastructure under each heading and informing the principal design features of that infrastructure. We also informed the project quantities for each project type. And in ICMS, project quantities is an important metric. For buildings, it's per square metre. For linear or horizontal infrastructure projects, it's per kilometre. And uniquely for quay walls, it's metre plus metered. So it's per metre run of the quay wall based on the retained height in metres, because as you'd all know, the higher the retained height, generally speaking, the higher the cost. We also informed the cost subgroups at level 4. So under each cost group at level 3, we have further definition of sub-cost groups at level 4. So we did that work also. So all of that work was completed, and after a period of public consultation, ICMS 3rd edition was finally published in November 2021. So since then, the Irish government have announced a mandate to adopt ICMS on all public works projects commencing stage 1 on or after the 1st of January 2024 for cost reporting. So what, as a contracting authority, do we do to comply with this mandate? Well, our scope of service now for the appointment of civil engineering consultancy and QS firms requires cost reports prepared throughout all stages of the project lifecycle be presented in the ICMS format using the Pillar 3 Capital Works Management Framework templates. We also require that the bill of quantities prepared at the end of stage 2 for public advertising in stage 3 be presented in ICMS format. And how's that going for us? We do a lot of multi-annual projects, so we haven't had too many new projects commence stage 1 since the mandate date, but for the few that we have had, we're not getting the cost reports back in the structure that we want in ICMS format. And that suggests a lack of familiarity with the standard out there. But hopefully events like today serve to highlight the opportunities and benefits of adopting ICMS, but also the fact that there is a government mandate to adopt it on all public works projects. My final slide relates to the opportunities and challenges associated with adopting ICMS on projects. I'll discuss the challenges first. So my first challenge there is competency with the determination of embodied and operational carbon on projects. So as professionals working in the built environment, we have to develop competency with the determination of embodied carbon elementally on our projects. So the carbon in the steel, the concrete and all the other materials, and also the operational carbon throughout the life of the asset. because the future regulatory environment will likely demand whole life carbon assessments throughout the project life cycle. So in the future, statutory permissions and permissions generally on projects will require us to understand the embodied and operational carbon on the project, and to prove that the design solution presented represents the optimal solution from the point of view of sustainability of the asset, but also its carbon performance throughout its life. Ireland has the legally binding climate targets of net 50% reduction in carbon emissions by 2030 and net zero by 2050. So by us understanding, measuring and lowering embodied and operational carbon, this will be how we will do our bit as professionals in the built environment to help Ireland meet these legally binding and challenging climate targets. And ICMS helps us to do that. Just in relation to the opportunities, ICMS is the only standard that combines life cycle costing and carbon emissions for the built environment. This is why it's been so widely adopted by the Irish government and internationally, and why digital platforms are also adopting it. It reduces the focus on the initial capital cost. So the level 2 categories of ACRO, acquisition, construction, renewal, operation, maintenance, end of life, from both the cost and emissions perspective, serve to reduce our focus on just the initial capital cost, which is the acquisition and construction. We will be looking at costs now throughout the whole life cycle of the asset and also the emissions. So that serves to drive value and sustainability of the assets that we deliver. ICMS allows for the comparative benchmarking on projects. So I think we'd all be familiar with maybe cost per square metre for residential or buildings or industrial buildings, not so much for infrastructure projects. But ICMS provides us with a framework for the comparative benchmarking of infrastructure projects as well, from both the cost point of view and the emissions point of view, once it's fully implemented. The RICS Whole Life Carbon Assessment in the Built Environment Professional Standard calls for the reporting of carbon emissions to the ICMS format. So that is a professional standard that provides guidance on the determination of embodied carbon, and it calls for the use of the ICMS 3 carbon reporting structure. Finally, the QS will become a core role in public works, because we'll be relying on our QSs to deliver the cost reports to ICMS format, but also to prepare the whole life carbon assessments for the assets that we deliver. So it's my view that, the QS will have opportunities for business growth and development, and many QS firms are SMEs and micro enterprises. So that provides additional revenue streams and opportunities for growth. So the 3 things I'd like you to take away from my presentation today, that ICMS, as a cost and emissions classification and reporting standard, is the only such standard that combines life cycle costing and carbon emissions for the built asset. There is a government mandate to adopt ICMS on all public works projects at the minute for cost reporting. And just to know that we have to develop an understanding and begin measuring embodied and operational carbon on our projects. So that concludes my presentation. I'd like to thank you all very much for listening.